They threw her off the cliff when she was barely hours old. Her newborn cries swallowed by 200 feet of empty air because dark marks covered her skin and the town called them evil. An Apache elder gathering herbs on the mountainside watched her fall, launched himself across the rock face and caught her tiny body in his weathered hands, saving the life her own people had condemned and changing both their worlds forever. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The morning sun had barely touched the peaks of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains when the first cry pierced the silence of the small settlement of Redemption Valley, New Mexico Territory, 1867. Inside a modest cabin at the edge of town, Margaret Thornton screamed through her final push, her body exhausted after 18 hours of labor. The midwife, old Mrs. Abernathy, caught the slippery infant with practiced hands, ready to announce the arrival of a healthy girl. But the words died in her throat. The baby's skin, pink and wrinkled like any newborn's, bore something the old woman had never seen in her 40 years of delivering children. Dark marks, like shadows cast by an unseen hand, traced patterns across the infant's face, neck, and tiny arms. They weren't bruises, weren't burns, weren't anything the midwife could name. They were simply there, as if the child had been painted by some force beyond understanding. "Sweet, merciful heaven," Mrs. Abernathy whispered, her hands trembling as she held the baby at arm's length. The infant's cries filled the cabin, strong and healthy, demanding to be held, to be loved. But the midwife's face had gone white as fresh snow. Margaret, still dazed with exhaustion and pain, reached out her arms. "My baby. Let me see my baby." The midwife hesitated, then slowly brought the child closer. Margaret's eyes widened as she took in the marks covering her daughter's skin. For a moment, just a moment, she saw only a beautiful child, her child. But then Mrs. Abernathy spoke the words that would seal the infant's fate. "It's the devil's touch, Margaret. I've heard of such things in the old country. Children born marked like this, they bring nothing but misfortune. Death follows them like a shadow." "No." Margaret's voice was barely a whisper. She tried to sit up, to take her daughter, but the midwife stepped back. "We must tell Reverend Blackwood. He'll know what to do." Within an hour, the small cabin was filled with people. Reverend Jonathan Blackwood stood at the foot of the bed, his severe face carved from granite, his eyes cold as he examined the crying infant from a distance. Beside him stood Thomas Thornton, Margaret's husband, a hard man who worked the silver mines and believed in the strictness of the Old Testament. His face showed no emotion as he looked at the child he had expected to welcome with joy. "This is a test," Reverend Blackwood announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "The child bears the marks of judgment. To keep her among us would be to invite God's wrath upon our entire community." Margaret sobbed, reaching out toward her baby, but her husband's hand on her shoulder held her down. "Thomas, please. She's our daughter, our blood." Thomas Thornton's jaw clenched. He had lost 2 children before this one, both to fever. He had prayed for a healthy child, had promised God anything if his wife survived this birth. Now he stood in his own cabin, surrounded by neighbors who looked at his newborn daughter with fear and disgust. "What would you have us do, Reverend?" he asked, his voice hollow. The old preacher's eyes glinted in the lamplight. "There's a cliff 3 miles east. The Indians call it the Edge of Judgment. In the old days, when they found weakness in their tribes, they would leave it there, return it to the earth." "You're talking about my child." Margaret's voice broke on the last word. "I'm talking about protecting this settlement," Blackwood replied without mercy. "Every soul here, including yours." The vote was quick. 27 families lived in Redemption Valley, and 26 voted to send the child away. Only one voice dissented, Margaret's, but a woman's voice held no weight in such matters. By noon, a small group had assembled. Thomas Thornton carrying a bundle wrapped in rough cloth, Reverend Blackwood with his Bible, and 5 other men as witnesses. Margaret was held back by the women, her screams echoing through the valley as they rode away. She fought against their restraining hands, calling her daughter's name, the name she had chosen in secret during the long months of pregnancy. Sarah! Her name is Sarah! But her voice was lost in the wind as the men rode toward the eastern cliffs, carrying the condemned child to her fate. The ride to the eastern cliffs took less than an hour, but for Thomas Thornton, each minute stretched into eternity. He held the bundle against his chest, feeling the warmth of his daughter's small body, hearing her occasional whimpers. She had stopped crying, exhausted from her brief life's first trauma. Inside the rough cloth, she slept with the innocence only a newborn could possess, unaware that the world had already judged her unworthy. The path grew steeper as they climbed. Pine trees gave way to scrub brush, then to bare rock. The horses picked their way carefully along the narrow trail that wound up the mountainside. Below them, the valley spread out like a patchwork quilt, the settlement of Redemption Valley barely visible in the distance. Above them, the cliff face rose like a monument to ancient judgment. "Almost there," Reverend Blackwood called back, his voice carrying no emotion. He rode at the front, his black coat flapping in the wind like the wings of a carrion bird. Behind him, the other men followed in silence. Not one of them spoke. Not one of them questioned what they were about to do. Thomas looked down at the bundle in his arms. A tiny hand had worked its way free from the cloth, fingers no bigger than twigs curled in sleep. Those marks that everyone feared. He could see them now in the daylight, dark patterns that looked almost like scattered leaves or the shadows of clouds. They didn't look evil to him. They just looked different. But different was dangerous. Different brought questions, brought fear, brought the judgment of God upon an entire community. At least, that's what Blackwood preached. And in Redemption Valley, what the Reverend said was law. They reached the summit just as the sun reached its peak. The edge of judgment was exactly as its name suggested, a sheer drop of nearly 200 feet into a rocky canyon below. Ancient juniper trees clung to the cliffsides, their twisted roots finding purchase in impossible places. Eagles nested in the crags, their cries echoing off the stone walls. The men dismounted. Thomas held the bundle close, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst through his ribs. Blackwood approached with his Bible open, ready to speak the words that would absolve them all of what they were about to do. "Thomas Thornton," the Reverend began, his voice formal and cold, "you stand at the threshold of a choice. Behind you lies the path of sentiment, of earthly attachment, of selfish desire. Before you lies the path of righteousness, of community, of God's will. Which will you choose?" Thomas's throat tightened. He thought of Margaret, probably still screaming in their cabin, held down by women who thought they were doing her a kindness. He thought of the 2 children they had already buried, their small graves marked with wooden crosses behind their home. He thought of the years of prayer, of pleading with God for just one healthy child. And now he held that child, breathing, alive, marked. His voice failed him. "Give her to me," Blackwood said, reaching for the bundle. But something made Thomas turn away. He walked to the edge of the cliff himself, the wind whipping his hair, the sun beating down on his shoulders. He unwrapped the cloth enough to see his daughter's face one more time. Sarah. Margaret had named her Sarah. The baby's eyes opened, blue, like his own. She looked up at him with that unfocused gaze of the newborn, seeing shapes and shadows, but not yet understanding the world she'd been born into. A world that wanted her dead. "Forgive me," Thomas whispered. Then he closed his eyes and extended his arms over the void. The bundle fell. Sarah's cry pierced the air as she dropped, a sound so pure and terrified that it seemed to crack the very sky. Down she plummeted, the cloth wrapping coming loose, tiny arms flailing against the rushing wind. 200 feet of empty air between her and the rocks below. From a ledge 50 feet down, hidden by an overhang and partially obscured by a twisted juniper, a man watched in horror. Running Bear had been gathering medicinal herbs from the cliff face, plants that grew nowhere else in these mountains. At 63 years old, his eyes were still sharp, and he had seen the men arrive at the summit. He had heard the Reverend's voice, though not the words. Now he saw the falling child. His body moved before his mind could question. He launched himself from his perch, scrambling across the rock face with the agility of someone who had spent a lifetime in these mountains. His fingers found holds that would have been invisible to anyone else. His feet landed on stones that shouldn't have supported his weight. The baby fell in what seemed like slow motion, her cries swallowed by the wind. Running Bear reached out, his weathered hand stretching toward the small, plummeting form. His fingers brushed cloth, missed, reached again, and caught her. The impact nearly pulled him from the cliff. His shoulder screamed in protest as he absorbed the force of the falling infant, his other hand gripping a root so hard he felt it cut into his palm. For a moment, he dangled there, suspended between earth and sky, an old man and a condemned child clinging to life by threads. Then, slowly, he pulled them both to safety on a narrow ledge. Above, the men stood at the cliff's edge, looking down at what they believed was empty air. They saw no movement, heard no cry. The deed was done. "It's finished," Reverend Blackwood said. "Let us return and never speak of this day again." Thomas Thornton stood frozen, his empty arms still extended, feeling the ghost weight of his daughter. He had just killed his own child. The realization hit him like a physical blow, and he fell to his knees. Running Bear remained motionless on the narrow ledge for several minutes, his heart pounding in his chest like war drums. The baby in his arms had stopped crying, perhaps from shock, perhaps from exhaustion. He could feel her tiny heartbeat against his weathered hand, rapid and fragile as a hummingbird's wing. Above him, the voices of the white men faded as they descended the mountain, returning to their settlement with blood on their souls. Slowly, carefully, he adjusted his position on the ledge. His shoulder throbbed where he had wrenched it catching the falling child, but the pain was distant, unimportant. What mattered was the life he held, this small person who had been cast away like garbage, who had been judged unworthy before she could even speak her first word. He unwrapped the cloth fully now, examining the infant in the bright afternoon sun. She was perhaps hours old, her skin still bearing the waxy coating of birth, and there, across her face and arms, were the marks that had condemned her. Running Bear traced them gently with one finger, his expression thoughtful. In his language he whispered, "Little one, they see darkness where I see beauty. These marks, they are like the patterns the Creator paints on the butterfly's wing, on the turtle's shell, on the sky at sunset." He paused, his voice catching with emotion. "They threw you away because they are blind, but I caught you because I see." The baby's eyes opened at the sound of his voice. She gazed up at him with that profound innocence that belongs only to the newly born, and Running Bear felt something shift in his chest. It had been many years since he had held an infant. His own children were grown, his wife had passed 3 winters ago, and his grandchildren were already learning to hunt and gather. He had thought his days of nurturing were behind him, but the spirits, it seemed, had other plans. The descent from the cliff took over an hour. Running Bear moved with patient deliberation, using paths known only to those who had lived in these mountains for generations. He wrapped the baby securely against his chest with strips of leather from his gathering bag, keeping her warm and safe as he climbed down. Several times she fussed, making small mewling sounds, and he hummed old songs his mother had sung to him decades ago. By the time he reached the base of the mountain, the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. His Apache camp lay 2 miles south, hidden in a valley where a clear stream ran year-round, and pine trees provided shelter from the harsh elements. It was a small group, only 15 families who had chosen to remain in the traditional ways rather than accept the reservation life that the American government demanded. As Running Bear approached the camp, carrying his unexpected burden, the women were the first to notice. Cloud Dancer, his eldest daughter, stood from where she had been tanning a deer hide. Her eyes widened at the sight of her father carrying an infant wrapped in white man's cloth. "Father," she called, her voice a mixture of confusion and concern. "What have you brought?" Other women gathered quickly. Morning Rain, the camp's other medicine woman, hurried forward with her hands outstretched. "Is the child hurt?" "Running Bear, where did you find her?" He said nothing until he reached the center fire, the heart of their small community. By then, most of the camp had assembled, men returning from hunting, children pausing their games, elders rising from their afternoon rest, all eyes fixed on the bundle he carried. "This morning," Running Bear began in his native tongue, his voice carrying across the gathering, "I went to the high cliffs to gather white sage and yarrow root. While I was there, I witnessed something that will haunt me until my last breath." He paused, letting his words sink in. The white men came to the edge of judgment. They brought this child, this infant barely born, and they threw her from the cliff. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Several women covered their mouths in horror. The men's faces hardened with anger and disgust. "They threw her because of these," Running Bear continued, gently pulling back the cloth to reveal Sarah's marked skin. "They called them signs of evil. They believed the child was cursed." Morning Rain stepped closer, her experienced eyes examining the baby. "These are birthmarks. Nothing more. I've seen such things before, though rarely so pronounced." She looked up at Running Bear. "The child is healthy. She fell from the sky into my hands," he replied, "and she lives. That alone tells me the spirits wanted her to survive." Cloud Dancer approached, her maternal instincts overriding her initial shock. "She needs milk. She needs warmth and care. Father, what do you intend to do?" Running Bear looked down at the baby in his arms. Sarah had fallen asleep again, her small chest rising and falling with peaceful breaths, completely unaware of the discussion happening around her. "What the spirits place in your path," he said quietly, "you do not turn away from. This child was given to me to save, so I will save her. I will raise her as my own." The debate that followed Running Bear's declaration lasted well into the night. Some voices spoke in favor of keeping the child, moved by compassion and the belief that all life was sacred. Others argued with equal passion that taking in a white child would bring trouble from the settlers, that it would invite conflict their small band could not afford. Swift Hawk, a warrior in his prime with scars from many battles, stood beside the fire with his arms crossed. "The white men threw this child away. What happens when they discover we have her? They will say we stole her. They will use it as an excuse to attack us, to drive us from these lands as they have driven so many others." "They believe she is dead," Running Bear countered, his voice calm but firm. "I watched them look down from the cliff. They saw nothing. They went home thinking their deed was done. And when she grows," Swifthawk pressed, "when she walks among us with her pale skin and those marks, when traders come, when soldiers pass through, how do we explain a white child living among us?" Cloud Dancer stepped forward, her infant son cradled in her arms. "We explain it with the truth, that we found an abandoned child and we cared for her. Is that not what our people have always done? Did not our ancestors take in children from other tribes? Did not my own grandmother come from the Navajo as a child?" Morning Rain moved to stand beside Running Bear, her presence lending weight to his decision. I have examined the child thoroughly. She is healthy, strong, but she needs milk, and she needs it soon. Cloud Dancer, your son is only 3 moons old. Your milk flows abundantly. Will you feed her?" Cloud Dancer looked at the sleeping infant, then at her father. She saw in his eyes something she had not seen since her mother passed, a sense of purpose, of rightness. She nodded slowly. "I will feed her. My son will have a sister." Not everyone agreed, but the decision was made. In Apache tradition, when an elder of Running Bear's standing made such a choice, it was respected even by those who disagreed. The council dispersed, some shaking their heads, others murmuring prayers for protection. That night, Sarah took her first meal in her new life. Cloud Dancer nursed her alongside her own son, Little Fox, and marveled at how eagerly the tiny girl drank. Running Bear sat nearby, watching with the tender expression of a grandfather, though he had decided he would be her father in all ways that mattered. "She needs a name," Cloud Dancer said softly. "We cannot call her by whatever name the white people gave her. She is one of us now." Running Bear considered this, his weathered face thoughtful in the firelight. "When I caught her, she was falling like a leaf torn from a tree by the storm. But she did not break. She survived what no child should survive." He paused, then spoke with certainty. "We will call her Falling Leaf. It will remind us always of how she came to us and how strong she truly is." "Falling Leaf," Cloud Dancer repeated, smiling down at the nursing infant. "It suits her." Meanwhile, 3 miles north in Redemption Valley, Thomas Thornton sat alone in his barn, unable to face his wife. He had not returned to their cabin after the men dispersed from the cliff. He could not bear to see Margaret's face, to answer the questions in her eyes, to confirm what she already knew. The barn was dark, except for a single lantern hanging from a post. Thomas held a bottle of whiskey he had been saving for celebrating Sarah's birth. Now he drank it to forget her death, but forgetting was impossible. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those tiny arms reaching up as she fell. Every time he drew breath, he heard her cry echoing off the canyon walls. "God forgive me," he whispered into the darkness. "God forgive me." But he knew, deep in his soul, that some acts were beyond forgiveness. He had murdered his own daughter, not with his hands perhaps, but with his weakness, his cowardice, his willingness to let fear and superstition guide him rather than love. In the cabin, Margaret had not stopped screaming until her voice gave out. Now she lay in their bed, her eyes open and dry, staring at the ceiling. The women who had held her down were gone. The midwife had left tinctures for pain, for sleep, but Margaret had thrown them all into the fire. She would not sleep. She would not let herself forget, not even for a moment, what had been done to her baby. "Sarah," she whispered to the empty room, "my Sarah." Reverend Blackwood stood in his church, alone before the altar. His Bible lay open to Deuteronomy, to the passages about removing evil from among the people. He had preached from these verses many times, had used them to justify countless harsh judgments. 5 years passed, like seasons flowing into one another, spring blossoms giving way to summer heat, autumn winds yielding to winter snows, and through it all, Falling Leaf grew. By the time she reached her 5th year, she was a whirlwind of energy and curiosity, racing through the Apache camp with her adopted brother Little Fox, their laughter echoing off the canyon walls. Her skin, pale in a community of bronze faces, and those distinctive marks that had condemned her at birth, made her unmistakably different. But here, among Running Bear's people, different did not mean cursed. The children called her Little Ghost affectionately, and she wore the nickname with pride, making it part of her games as she pretended to fade into shadows and reappear to startle her friends. Running Bear watched her development with the careful eye of a medicine man and the tender heart of a father. She learned quickly, absorbing the Apache language as naturally as breathing. By 3, she could name every plant in his medicine bag. By 4, she could identify animal tracks and predict weather patterns by reading the sky. By 5, she was already showing signs of the healer's gift. "Grandfather," she called one morning. She called him grandfather, though he insisted he was her father, but the word felt right to both of them. Why do the white people live in boxes made of wood? Running Bear smiled at her question. They stood on a ridge overlooking the valley, where she could just make out the distant settlement of Redemption Valley. He brought her here sometimes, teaching her about both worlds she belonged to, though she did not yet know her full story. "They fear the open sky," he answered thoughtfully. "They try to tame the earth rather than live with it. They build walls between themselves and nature, between themselves and the spirits, between themselves and each other." "That sounds lonely," Falling Leaf said, her young voice carrying an old wisdom. "It is, little one, it is. But life in the Apache camp was not without its challenges. Some still questioned the wisdom of keeping a white child among them. Red Cloud, Swifthawk's wife, kept her children away from Falling Leaf, whispering that the girl's marks might be contagious, might bring bad fortune. When Falling Leaf tried to play with their daughter, White Dove, the girl was called inside. Falling Leaf pretended not to notice, but Running Bear saw the hurt in her eyes. That evening, as they sat by their fire preparing the evening meal, he spoke to her gently. "Not everyone can see past what frightens them," he said, grinding herbs with his mortar. "Red Cloud lost her brother in a raid by white soldiers. When she looks at you, she sees pain, not the child you are." "But I'm not like those soldiers," Falling Leaf protested, her small hands stilling in their work of cutting roots. "No, you are not. But fear does not always listen to reason." He paused in his grinding, looking at her seriously. "You must understand something, Falling Leaf. You walk between 2 worlds. The white world that cast you out, and our world that took you in. There will be people in both who cannot accept you. The strength you need is not to make them accept you, but to accept yourself." She nodded, trying to understand concepts that seemed too big for her young mind. "Grandfather, am I Apache or am I white?" Running Bear set down his mortar and pulled her onto his lap, something he did less often now that she was getting bigger. "You are Falling Leaf. You are the child the spirit saved. You are my daughter. Your skin may be pale and marked in ways that others fear, but your heart beats with the rhythm of our people. Your spirit knows our songs. Your hands have learned our ways. That is what matters." "But what about my first parents?" she asked, the question that had been growing in her mind for months. "The ones who made me." Running Bear had known this question would come eventually. He had prepared his answer, though speaking it still caused him pain. "They could not keep you. Sometimes adults make terrible mistakes out of fear, but their mistake brought you to me, and I cannot regret that." "Do they know I'm alive?" "No, little one, they believe you are gone." Falling Leaf was quiet for a long moment, processing this information in the way children do, with more understanding than adults often credit them with. "Then I'm glad I'm here, with you, with Little Fox and Cloud Dancer and Morning Rain." That night, as Falling Leaf slept wrapped in soft deerskins, Running Bear sat outside their dwelling watching the stars. He thought about the day he had caught her, how his hands had stretched out and somehow found their mark. 5 years ago, he had saved her body. Since then, he had tried to save her spirit, to give her a foundation of love and belonging that would sustain her through whatever trials lay ahead, because he knew, with the certainty of a man who read signs in nature and dreams, that trials would come. The girl was special. Not cursed, as the white men believed, but gifted. He saw it in how animals approached her without fear, how plants seemed to grow stronger where she walked, how her presence brought calm to troubled spirits. The autumn Falling Leaf turned 8, Running Bear began taking her on longer journeys to gather medicine plants. These expeditions served dual purposes, teaching her the healer's craft and keeping her away from the tensions that occasionally flared in camp regarding her presence. Swifthawk had recently returned from a scouting mission with news that more white settlers were moving into the territory and old fears were stirring. One crisp October morning, they traveled to Willow Creek, a place where rare healing plants grew in the moist soil near the water. Falling Leaf carried a woven basket on her back, humming one of the gathering songs Running Bear had taught her. Little Fox had wanted to come, but Cloud Dancer had kept him home to help prepare for the upcoming winter, so it was just grandfather and granddaughter moving through the pine forest. "Remember," Running Bear instructed as they walked, "we never take more than we need. We always leave enough for the plant to continue growing, to feed the animals, to spread its seeds. We thank each plant for its sacrifice." "I know, grandfather," Falling Leaf replied, but without impatience. She had heard these lessons many times, but she understood their importance. The earth provides for us when we respect it. They spent the morning gathering, yarrow for wounds, willow bark for pain, sage for purification. Falling Leaf's small hands worked with practiced efficiency, never pulling where she should cut, never taking the whole plant when only a part was needed. Running Bear watched her with pride, seeing in her movements the future medicine woman she would become. They were so absorbed in their work that neither noticed the sound of horses until they were almost upon them. Running Bear looked up sharply, his hand instinctively moving to the knife at his belt. 3 riders emerged from the tree line, white men armed and wary. They reined in their horses when they spotted the Apache man and the pale-skinned girl gathering plants by the creek. Falling Leaf moved behind Running Bear, her heart pounding. She had seen white people from a distance, but never this close. They looked strange to her, with their heavy clothing and hard faces, so different from the open expressions of her people. One of the riders, a man with a thick beard and a sheriff's badge glinting on his vest, urged his horse forward. "Well now," he said in English, which Falling Leaf understood but rarely spoke. "What do we have here?" Running Bear straightened, positioning himself protectively in front of his granddaughter. He spoke in careful English, learned in his youth. "We gather medicine plants. We bother no one." "That right?" The sheriff's eyes fixed on Falling Leaf, narrowing as he took in her pale skin and distinctive marks. "That your child, Indian?" "She is my granddaughter," Running Bear replied, his voice steady, despite the tension coiling in his muscles. The second rider, younger with nervous hands, leaned toward the sheriff. "Sheriff Daniels, look at her skin." "She's white. Those marks. I can see that, Billy," the sheriff interrupted, never taking his eyes off Running Bear. "Question is, how'd a white girl end up with an Apache?" "She is mine," Running Bear said simply. "She has always been mine." Sheriff Daniels dismounted slowly, his hand resting on his gun belt, not threatening, but ready. "There's been talk of raids, of children taken. I'm going to need you to come with us, answer some questions." "We have taken no children," Running Bear said firmly. "This one was given to me by the spirits themselves." Falling Leaf stepped out from behind her grandfather, her young voice clear and strong despite her fear. "He is my grandfather. He saved me. I belong with him." The sheriff crouched down to her level, trying to appear friendly. "What's your name, child?" "Falling Leaf." "That's an Indian name. What was your name before?" She looked confused. "I have always been Falling Leaf." The third rider, an older man with a weathered face, spoke for the first time. "Sheriff, maybe we should just let them be. They're not causing trouble." But Sheriff Daniels stood, his jaw set. "Can't do that, Frank. A white child living with Indians, that needs investigating. He looked at Running Bear. "I'm not arresting you. Just asking you to come to Redemption Valley, talk to the Reverend and some folks there, clear this up peaceable." Running Bear felt ice form in his chest. Redemption Valley, the place where this child had been condemned and cast away. If they took her there, if anyone recognized those marks. "We will not go," he said quietly. The sheriff's hand moved closer to his gun. "That's not really a choice I'm offering." What happened next occurred in heartbeats. Running Bear grabbed Falling Leaf's hand and turned to run. The sheriff shouted. Billy's horse reared. Frank reached for his rifle. And Falling Leaf, terrified and acting on instinct, did something she had never done before. She screamed. Not a normal scream of fear, but something deeper, something that seemed to come from the earth itself. The sound rolled out from her like thunder, carrying with it a force that made the horses bolt, that sent the men stumbling backward, that shook leaves from the trees and sent birds exploding into the sky. In the chaos, Running Bear scooped her up and ran, his old legs finding strength in desperation. They crashed through the underbrush, his knowledge of the land guiding them along paths no white man could follow. They ran for nearly an hour before Running Bear's legs finally gave out. He collapsed against a boulder, his chest heaving, still clutching Falling Leaf's hand. She stood beside him, her face pale with exhaustion and confusion, not fully understanding what she had done or how she had done it. "Grandfather," she gasped, "what happened?" "That sound, it came from me, but I didn't know how." "Breathe, little one," Running Bear managed between gulps of air. "Breathe. You are safe." But even as he said it, he knew it was not entirely true. They had escaped, yes, but everything had changed. The white men had seen her. Questions would be asked. Memories might be stirred. When they finally made it back to camp, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson. Cloud Dancer ran to meet them, her face tight with worry. "Father, we heard you were seen by white men. Little Fox said he had a vision." "Not now," Running Bear interrupted gently. "Gather the elders. We must counsel." The meeting that night was tense and divided. Swifthawk stood before the fire, his voice sharp with anger. "I warned you years ago that keeping the white child would bring trouble. Now soldiers and lawmen will come looking for her. They will use her as an excuse to drive us out, to take our remaining lands." "She is not a white child," Cloud Dancer snapped, her arms crossed defensively. "She is Apache. She is my sister. She is one of us." "Her skin tells a different story," Red Cloud interjected, speaking up for the first time. "And those marks, the white men fear them. That fear will turn to violence against all of us." Falling Leaf sat beside Running Bear, trying to make herself small, trying not to cry. She understood enough to know she was the cause of this conflict, that her presence was endangering the people she loved. Morning Rain, who had been silent until now, raised her weathered hand. The child showed power today. Power that drove away men with guns without violence. Perhaps the spirits have been preparing her for something we do not yet understand. Or perhaps, Swifthawk countered, that power is exactly what the white men will fear most. They kill what they fear. The debate continued late into the night, but no decision was reached. Running Bear took Falling Leaf back to their dwelling, where she finally broke down, sobbing into his chest. "I don't want to cause trouble. I don't want anyone to be hurt because of me." He stroked her hair, his heart breaking for her. "You have caused nothing, child. The trouble was always there, waiting. You are simply the place where two rivers meet, and sometimes that meeting creates turbulence." In Redemption Valley, Sheriff Daniels sat in Reverend Blackwood's study, recounting the day's encounter. The Reverend listened with growing alarm, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Marks, you say?" "On her face and arms." "Yes, Reverend. Dark marks like shadows. Never seen anything quite like it." Blackwood's face had gone white. "How old would you say this child was?" 7, maybe 8 years old. The Reverend stood abruptly, moving to his window. 8 years. It had been 8 years since that terrible day at the cliff. But the child had fallen. He had seen it. They all had. Unless... "Sheriff," he said slowly, "I need you to gather a party. Well armed. I believe that child may have been stolen from this very community years ago." Daniels frowned. Stolen? From who? From God-fearing people who made a difficult choice to protect their community. And if I'm right, those savages have been hiding her all this time. Margaret Thornton was hanging laundry when she heard the commotion in the town square. 8 years had carved deep lines into her face, lines of grief that never fully healed. She had not smiled since the day her daughter was taken from her. She had not truly lived, merely existed, moving through each day like a ghost in her own life. Thomas had left her 3 years ago, unable to bear the weight of what he had done. He drank himself to death in a boarding house in Santa Fe, and Margaret had not attended his funeral. Some sins, she believed, extended beyond the grave. Now she walked toward the gathering crowd, drawn by curiosity and the desperate need for any distraction from her thoughts. Sheriff Daniels stood on the church steps alongside Reverend Blackwood, addressing a group of armed men. "The Indians have been harboring a white child," the sheriff was saying. "A girl about 8 years old, with unusual markings on her skin. We need to retrieve her. Bring her back to civilization where she belongs." Margaret's legs went weak. The laundry basket slipped from her hands, scattering clean sheets in the dust. Markings, 8 years old. Number, it couldn't be. She pushed through the crowd, her voice raw and desperate. "What markings? Describe them." The sheriff looked down at her with pity. "Mrs. Thornton, this isn't..." "Describe them," she screamed, and the square fell silent. Sheriff Daniels exchanged a glance with Blackwood before answering. "Dark marks, ma'am." Across her face, her arms, like shadows or birthmarks. The child claimed her name was Falling Leaf, but clearly... Margaret collapsed to her knees, her hands pressed to her mouth as sobs tore through her body. Around her, the crowd murmured in confusion. But old Mrs. Abernathy, the midwife, understood. She had been there that terrible morning 8 years ago. "Dear God," the midwife whispered, "it's the Thornton baby." She survived. The revelation spread through the crowd like wildfire. Reverend Blackwood's face turned ashen. The men who had ridden with Thomas that day, 5 of them still lived in Redemption Valley, looked at each other with growing horror and disbelief. "That's impossible," Blackwood stammered. "The child fell. We all saw..." "You saw nothing!" Margaret screamed, rising to her feet with a fury that had been building for 8 years. "You threw my baby off a cliff, and you didn't even have the decency to check if she died. And now you're telling me the Indians, those savages you preach against, they saved her? They've been caring for my daughter while you prayed over her grave?" The Reverend tried to regain control. "Now, Margaret, we did what was necessary." The child was marked. She would have brought... "She was a baby." Margaret's voice cracked with anguish. "She was my baby, and you murdered her, or tried to. God help me, you tried to kill my child because you were afraid of a birthmark." Sheriff Daniels stepped between them. "Mrs. Thornton, I understand you're upset, but we need to focus on getting the child back." "Her name is Sarah," Margaret said, her voice suddenly cold and clear. "And if you think I'm going to let you or anyone in this godforsaken town near my daughter after what you did, you're insane." She turned to face the crowd, addressing them all. "Any man who rides against those Indians is riding against me. They saved my child when you all condemned her. They are not her enemies. You are." With those words, she turned and walked toward her home, her spine straight despite her trembling. She had spent 8 years in the Valley of Grief. Now she would climb out, whatever it took. That night, Running Bear sat with Falling Leaf beside their fire. He had decided the time had come to tell her everything. She deserved the truth, especially now when that truth was about to crash into their lives with the force of a mountain storm. "Grandfather," she said softly, Am I going to have to leave? I do not know, little one. But before anything else happens, you must know your full story. You must know how you came to me. And so he told her about the cliff, about the white men throwing her away, about his impossible catch, his choice to save her, to raise her as his own. He left nothing out, not even the painful parts. Falling Leaf listened in silence, her young face processing truths too heavy for a child. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she asked the question he had been dreading. Do you know who they were? My birth parents. No, I was too far away to see their faces. I only saw the Reverend's black coat and the men on horseback. Falling Leaf stared into the fire, watching the flames dance. They threw me away because of these, she said, touching the marks on her face. The same marks that Red Cloud fears. The same marks that make me different. Yes, but you caught me anyway. The armed party from Redemption Valley arrived at the Apache camp 3 days later, 20 men on horseback with rifles across their saddles. Sheriff Daniels led them, but behind him rode Margaret Thornton, her face set with determination despite the Reverend's protests. She had secured her own horse and announced that if they were going for her daughter, she would be there. Running Bear had known they were coming. Morning Rain had seen it in her dreams, and scouts had reported riders approaching from the north. The camp was ready, not for war, but for whatever the spirits decreed. Falling Leaf stood beside her grandfather as the riders crested the ridge overlooking the camp. Her heart pounded, but she kept her spine straight, remembering everything he had taught her about dignity and courage. Little Fox stood on her other side, his hand gripping hers tightly. The riders descended slowly, and Running Bear walked forward to meet them, his hands open and empty. Falling Leaf moved to follow, but Cloud Dancer held her back. Not yet, her Apache mother whispered. Wait. Sheriff Daniels dismounted first, followed by his men. Margaret swung down from her horse with less grace, but equal determination. Her eyes scanned the camp desperately until they landed on the pale-skinned girl with the unmistakable marks across her face and arms. Sarah, Margaret breathed, and her knees nearly buckled. Falling Leaf heard the name, her first name, the one given at birth, and something inside her shifted. She pulled away from Cloud Dancer and walked forward, her steps slow and measured. The two groups watched in tense silence as the 8-year-old girl approached the woman who had given her life. They stopped 3 feet apart, studying each other. Margaret saw the Apache clothing, the braided hair, the confident posture of a child raised with love and purpose. Falling Leaf saw the grief lines on her birth mother's face, the tears streaming down her cheeks, the hands that trembled with the desire to reach out but did not. They told me you were dead, Margaret said, her voice breaking. For 8 years, I believed my baby was dead. I was, Falling Leaf replied in careful English. The girl you knew died when she fell. I am Falling Leaf now. I am Apache. The words hit Margaret like physical blows, but she understood their truth. This child had been shaped by a different world, given a different life. Can you forgive me for not fighting harder? For letting them take you? Falling Leaf tilted her head, considering. Running Bear had taught her that forgiveness was not about erasing the past, but about choosing not to carry its weight. You did not throw me. You tried to stop them. Grandfather told me he heard a woman screaming my name as they rode away. That was you. Yes, Margaret sobbed. I screamed until I had no voice left. Behind them, Reverend Blackwood stepped forward, his presence a shadow over the moment. The child should come home now. Return to her own kind, to Christian civilization. No. The word came from Falling Leaf, clear and firm. She turned to face the Reverend, and in that moment, she looked older than her years. You threw me away because you were afraid of what you didn't understand. These marks, she touched her face, you called them a curse, but grandfather says they are like patterns on a butterfly's wing, something beautiful that you could not see. Child, you don't understand. I understand that you would have let me die, and I understand that these people saved me. She gestured to the Apache gathering behind her. So no, I will not go with you. This is my home. Margaret wiped her eyes, then did something that shocked everyone present. She walked past her daughter and directly to Running Bear. She fell to her knees before him, her hands pressed together in supplication. "Thank you," she said, her voice raw with emotion. "Thank you for saving my daughter. Thank you for loving her when I couldn't. Thank you for being the father she needed." Running Bear gently raised her to her feet, his weathered face kind. "A child is not property to be owned. She is a spirit to be nurtured. You gave her life. We gave her a different life. Both are gifts." What happened next would be spoken of for generations, though the details would change with each telling. What remained constant was the truth at its heart. Margaret Thornton did not try to take her daughter back to Redemption Valley. Instead, she asked permission to stay in the Apache camp, to learn the life her daughter had lived, to know the people who had raised her. Running Bear granted it, and for 3 weeks, the white woman lived among them. She learned to grind corn the way Cloud Dancer showed her. She helped Morning Rain gather healing plants, retracing the paths her daughter had walked. She watched Falling Leaf run with Little Fox and the other children, saw how seamlessly she moved between Apache language and English, how respected she was as a young healer in training. And Margaret learned something that transformed her understanding of the world. Her daughter had not just survived among these people, she had thrived. The marks that Redemption Valley called a curse had become irrelevant here, noticed but not feared, different but not damning. On the morning Margaret prepared to leave, Falling Leaf came to her with a question that had been growing in her heart. Can I have 2 mothers? One who gave me life and one who taught me to live? Margaret embraced her daughter, finally allowing herself to truly hold the child she thought she had lost. You can have as many mothers as your heart can hold, and I will come back if they allow it. I will know you, Sarah. Falling Leaf. You can call me Sarah too, the girl said thoughtfully. That name is part of who I was. Falling Leaf is who I became. Maybe I can be both. Before Margaret left, she did one more thing. She stood before the gathered Apache people and the few settlers who had accompanied her, and she spoke words that would echo through the territory. "These marks on my daughter's skin," she said, touching Falling Leaf's face gently. "I was taught they were a curse, but I have learned they are something else entirely. They are a map showing us that different does not mean damned, that fear comes from ignorance, that love is the only power greater than prejudice." She turned to Reverend Blackwood, who had remained silent throughout her stay, his certainty crumbling. "You wanted to erase what you could not understand. But these people, these savages you preach against, they understood what we could not, that every life has value, that mercy is stronger than judgment." Not all hearts changed that day. Red Cloud still kept her distance. Some men from Redemption Valley rode home muttering about Indian ways corrupting white children. Reverend Blackwood returned to his church, though his sermons would never carry the same conviction. But enough hearts did change. Margaret became a bridge between the two communities, advocating for peace and understanding. Falling Leaf grew into a woman who walked with confidence in both worlds, her marks no longer a source of shame, but a symbol of her unique journey. She became a renowned healer, treating both Apache and settler alike, teaching others that true medicine heals more than just the body. It heals the divisions between people. Running Bear lived to see his granddaughter turn 20, old enough to see her become what he always knew she would be, a bridge between worlds, a living testament that love and compassion can catch even a falling child. Years later, standing on that same cliff where she was once cast away, Falling Leaf, now also called Sarah by those who knew her full story, would bring her own children to that edge. She would tell them about the grandfather who caught her against impossible odds, about the mother who screamed her name, about the two peoples who eventually learned that the space between them was not as wide as they feared. These marks, she would tell them, touching her face, are not a curse. They are proof that I survived. They are proof that different does not mean dangerous. They are proof that when we choose compassion over fear, miracles happen. And her children, carrying the blood of both worlds in their veins, would understand that they too were bridges, that they too could choose love over fear, that they too could catch falling souls and teach them to fly. Some stories end with happily ever after. This one ends with something more powerful, hope, hard-won and held sacred, that humanity can evolve beyond its darkest impulses towards something beautiful.